This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Well, joining us today for a special feature on Ditau and the BIF, that's the Banded Iron Formation, is Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources. Now, we did mention we would do this on an interview last week, Ben, following some RNS releases regarding the status and what's been going on at Ditau. But we're going to go through in a bit more detail, look at some of the previous holes that were drilled, look at some core pictures, and you're going to tell us really about the plans. So I'll hand over to you first of all, and take it away, and I'll come in with questions as and when I have them.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity, Mark. It's always good to be able to add a bit more context to the work that we're doing. So here's our usual disclaimer that we have to publish before every presentation. So this is target I-10. We originally targeted I-10 as a potential carbonatite structure. So if investors think back to about this time last year, we've been pursuing Ditau as a potential carbonatite project. It was a geophysics-led exploration strategy. So Kavango had done a bit of limited drilling back in 2019, which led Mike Moles in particular to come up with this carbonatite idea. Now, as it's turned out, the carbonatite idea is not necessarily completely dead in the water, but we've obviously now taken a very, very different direction based on these results from the drilling of I-10 and the report by Dr. Hamid Moomin, who's identified this Lode gold potential in this target area. Now, I-10 itself, as you can see, is a very discrete, about 1 by 1.5 kilometre sized anomaly that, of course, we didn't know what it was until we drilled this. Now, last spring, when we came to drill, we actually drilled 2 holes targeting this. We put DIT DD03 slightly to the north, which targeted the magnetic low, and DD004, which basically targeted the middle of the magnetic anomaly. So what I should have said is a lot of the targeting was based on both airborne and ground magnetic work that we had done. Now, when our guys were out in the field, Hillary in particular, Hillary found that another company with overlapping diamond licenses had drilled 2 other holes right next to each other, almost between the 2 holes that we were going to drill. Now, that was a very interesting lead for us, but we didn't think much more of it at the time. It wasn't really the opportunity for us to pursue this. But it was only been in the last month since we've announced this Lode gold potential that we pursued this as an exploration lead. And what we've found after Brett went and did a review of the cores of this particular hole, we found that the anomaly itself now appears to be a contiguous body that stretches at least from our hole DIT D004 up to this hole XO77, slightly to the northwest, which is about 470 meters. You can see that on the map here. Now, of course, what we don't know yet is what does the rest of this body mean? Could this be the rest of the BIF Formation? This is one of the exploration leads that we're going to be pursuing quite aggressively in the coming months. Now, obviously, from our perspective, this is very exciting. The thing about this particular target area is it is relatively small, but it's very, very discrete. It's the sort of system that could potentially host an ore body in it. So as far as Kavango is concerned, this is fast developing into one of our hottest exploration leads. And what I'd like to do in a moment, Mark, is take you through some of the core photos. But before we do that, when we went to review the cores last month, when Brett and the team went down there with the representatives from the Botswana Geological Institute, we also came across, or I should say we were guided to, this whole XO81, which is about 3 kilometers to the southwest of DD004. Now, this wasn't a target area that we were looking at previously, but the lead itself has turned into something very interesting. We've got what looks like a similar style of mineralizing system, we think, but of course assay testing is going to tell us a lot more about that. But one of the things we're particularly interested in, and this was something we were aware of previously, but if you look at this straight line that runs across the magnetic map that we're looking at here, there appears to be some sort of major break in the Earth's crust, which we're interpreting as a potential Karoo age dike. Now, it could well be that this could be the source of the mineralizing fluids that have passed through this region. And again, if you're looking at sort of the potential for the system here, that is one of the key ingredients you need, is you need obviously a source for where mineralizing fluids could ultimately have come from. So this really is turning into a really exciting lead for us, and we can't wait for assay results to come out in the coming weeks.
I mean, looking at that band there, I've never seen anything like that on a mag survey before. I don't know if you have or your geologists and your team have before. I mean, it's really quite sharp, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very pronounced in this definition, in this resolution, I should say, which is, I don't know about misleading, but it's certainly sort of there for visual effect. But this is a feature that we believe does exist. Now, that also fits in with our regional interpretation. So part of the reason that we targeted I-10 in the first place was because of this feature. We have similar features running through the Great Red Spot up in the KSZ mark. So we do come across these, and as I say, we identify these as potential areas for source of mineralizing fluids to have come through towards the Earth's surface to create, obviously, the modern mineral deposits that we are after these days. So it can be a key ingredient when doing regional interpretation on this type of target area. And so far for us, everything does seem to fit quite neatly with what Dr. Moomin has told us about the potential for this system to be a possible Lode gold system.
Okay, and as you say there, that's potential for a Karoo dike that would allow for the fluids to form in a certain area, which possibly is the spotted area there where you've been drilling.
Could well be.
Okay.
I mean, look, obviously, we need to do much more work to test this, but so far it is looking very encouraging. So we have the assay results will be coming in the next few weeks from hole XO77. That's the one we're most excited about. I'll show you the images in a minute and some of the photos and why we're so excited. But before we move on to that, here's just a very simple plan view map. So you can see our hole 003 to the north. We didn't hit anything in that particular hole of any real significant interest. We did, however, obviously hit that 100 meters of this wonderful banded iron formation at 004. But now at at this XO77 hole, this is giving us an idea of sort of how contained the system might be. And it's possibly quite telling that our hole 003 didn't hit anything, whereas hole XO77 did, and they're only a couple of 100 meters away from each other. So that's quite good news for us because it gives us a very constrained area to focus our exploration efforts on. Now, we'll talk a bit more about the next step for Ditau at the end of this presentation, but it's worth just bearing that particular point in mind, that we've got a very constrained target area for us to work within.
Excellent. Okay. And these other holes and these holes beginning with X, they were done by a different company operating in the area previously, looking for diamonds, I think?
Well, actually at the same time. So these holes were drilled in 2021, so relatively recently. So the way it works in Botswana is you have metals exploration prospecting licenses, which Kavango has over the Ditau project area, but these can be overlapped by diamond exploration licenses, which can be run by a completely separate company. So in this instance, yes, it was a different company who was exploring for diamonds, but over the same ground. When we found those drill caps and we've seen that those two holes had been abandoned, that was quite encouraging for us in some ways, because what we felt was that obviously showed that it wasn't a kimberlite. It's quite possible that this I-10 target could have been a kimberlite because of the geophysical, quite compact nature of the target itself. So it was, in some ways, it was a bit of a tick in the box for us before we started drilling. But yeah, this was very recent drilling.
You mentioned earlier there about potential Lode gold. Could you explain perhaps a little bit more about what that is and why you think there's potential for that here?
Yeah, so that brings us neatly onto this slide, Mark. So a banded iron formation is obviously a very rich rock formation that's very rich in iron. Now, the reason that iron is very important is because iron can act effectively as a chemical block. So when superheated hydrothermal fluids would have passed through a geological area, if iron was present, what that could have basically acted at is a trap to pull the gold out of these fluids to form into deposits and hopefully pool in trap zones to form as commercial deposits. Now, that's obviously one ingredient, is the iron. What you then also need to see, as we can see on these photos here, is clear evidence of what's called brecciation, so breaking up of the rocks, fracturing of the rocks, but also veins, where veins of effectively of magma have passed through the system, again, bringing mineralization with them. Now, what we're seeing in the banded iron formation that we were pretty excited about when we first saw this is that these rocks were heavily brecciated. They'd clearly been through a lot of sort of geologically sort of altering processes. So the geochemistry had obviously changed. There was a lot of evidence of pyrites. So you can see obviously mineralizing processes had also occurred, and the system itself was very thick. Now, our team, we didn't have so much experience in lode gold systems. We didn't know exactly what it was we were looking at. We showed these photos far and wide, and there were a few people who had a few ideas, but it was only when Jeremy took this data to Dr. Moomin over in Canada, who, as it turns out, is one of the world's leading experts in lode gold systems. Jeremy really did the company a great service by pursuing this lead and by taking this to Dr. Moomin. And he's obviously the person who's come back and has given us this idea that what we could be looking at is a lode gold system. So what you basically need is a banded iron formation. You need for that banded iron formation to have been broken up, to have allowed fluid pathways for the hydrothermal fluids to have passed through. So we know we've got tick in the box for those two particular characteristics. The thickness of the system can also be very relevant because that can give an idea of how much volume, how much liquid could have passed through. And so far from what we've seen, we've got a very thick BIF. These BIFs can run from sort of a few meters in in thickness to several hundred meters. And at the moment, the Ditau DIT DD004 BIF is 100 meters and open at depth. We encountered it at 293 meters. It went down to 393, and that's where we stopped the hole. So that's a third tick in the box. That's telling us we're dealing with a very large system. The final sort of main tick in the box that we're looking for now are, of course, the trap zones. So we need to see whereabouts in the BIF are we at the moment? How high up in it are we? But we also now need to look for areas where gold could have accumulated. We've got evidence of gold mineralization. We saw those anomalous values that we passed last year. Brett did some fantastic work on this. That's our COO, Brett Grist. It was Brett who really chased the gold lead by asking for quite a comprehensive suite of analysis when we sent this rocks off for testing. So this really has been a team effort from the technical team. And so far it is looking very exciting. So the next step, of course, is to get the assay results from the holes that we've analysed slightly to the north. And then hopefully that will give us more confirmation that this is actually potentially a system for lode gold.
Okay. So the red we're seeing, is that the iron? Is that the banded iron formation? Okay, right, that makes sense. Okay. And you've got 3 out of the 4 ticks in the boxes for a potential BIF formation.
Exactly. So three out of the 4 so far. So now what we're looking for, basically, are trap sites.
A trap sites, yeah. Okay. So that's where it's going to be concentrated. The mineralization is going to be concentrated.
We hope. That's exactly what we're aiming for.
Is there a typical, I don't know if you can describe, I'm sure people can Google it, but a typical BIF formation? I know you Google things like VMS formations, that kind of thing. You can see nice diagrams. Are you able to articulate it or not? Is it something people should perhaps tap into Google?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's certainly worth Googling. It's very interesting. But of course, these no two geological systems are ever the same. Really, from our point of view, at this particular point, what we're now looking for is evidence, more evidence of the size of the system, how much gold sort of might have passed through this and dropped out while it was passing through in the hydrothermal fluids. And now obviously we're looking for potential trap zones for accumulation of a possible ore body. So it's very difficult to sort of, compare like with like, because these systems, there's a great deal of variability between them. But what we are looking at, this 1 by 1.5 kilometer size in terms of its surface shape, its surface marker, that is the sort of size I think you would hope for to contain, a possible ore body.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that.
So what that then brings us to is what we've then seen at hole XO77. So we published this next image in the RNS that we published last week on this. And what you can quite clearly see, obviously the photography, the lighting is different, but you can very clearly see this red mineralization, that this banded iron formation extends from our hole 004 up to this hole XO77. I mean, it's even to the sort of uninitiated, untrained eye, you can see that we're basically looking at the same rock style. What got really exciting for our team is when we saw the bottom of the hole. Now, As I said in our analysis of our rock cores, we already had evidence of pyrite, of carbonates, and of course gold, anomalous gold values. Now, the pyrite in particular is very significant because it appears to be coincidental with the gold. Now, you'd expect to see that in a low gold system. So that's a very positive point in terms of sort of the exploration model here. What's really exciting for us is that if we look at this particular image, as you can see, it's marked at 188.93 meters depth. This is where the hole was actually stopped. From our point of view as metals explorers, it's quite incredible that this hole was stopped where it was, because this really is where things were starting to get juicy. You can see obviously that reddish tinge of the BIF formation, but what you can also see is this very, very tightly packed and quite prolific presence of pyrite, and that was increasing and intensifying. So as you got deeper into the hole, the mineralization, the pyrite mineralization was getting stronger the deeper in you got, and this hole was obviously stopped. Of course, the reason the company who was drilling this stopped this is because this was a zero commercial use to them. Kavango had the metals licenses, so we're the only company that can legitimately prospect for this style of mineralization. So that's why this hole was stopped. But from our point of view, this really does look incredibly exciting, and I think it's a very safe bet that we will come back to drill this. We'll put a twin hole alongside this one to see really how deep this system runs. But before we rush to do that, what we want to see is what the assays come back and tell us. Now, look, we're not expecting this to be all of a sudden an economic discovery or anything sort of as wildly optimistic as that. So what we're looking for right now is we're looking for as strong as possible anomalous gold, possibly copper readings from these cores to give us an indication of what might be deeper within the system. If we get good enough readings, and of course we just have to wait for the assay results to come back, but if we get good enough readings, then that obviously will give us very strong justification to move to the next phase of exploration, which will include more surface surveying work. So you can use a form of surveying called IP surveying to look for potential accumulation of sulfide. So this pyrite that you can see here, you can use IP surveys to look for concentrations of that sulfide, because the sulfide appears to be connected to the gold. So if you can find the sulfide in sufficient quantity, if you can drill that, the logic is that what you then might stand to find is, of course, potentially a gold deposit. So that will be one next step. And of course, the other is simply to come back and drill this hole in particular, and maybe drill some other holes into the target I-10. As we saw on the magnetic map earlier on, we've got from the center to the north of the anomaly, and it appears to be contiguous. It would be very nice to be able to find out to the east and west and south to give us an idea as whether or not that red blob that you saw on the map, is that all the BIF? Is that all the system that we're looking at? So this really is it's a very exciting lead for us. There's more work that we need to do. First step, of course, is the assays.
Okay, so the assays come back where you're looking for anomalous copper and gold, as you say, and that will then help you to then plan by using further ground survey work, IP, etc., to map out a new drilling program. What happens if the assays don't come back with that kind of result? How would that affect the exploration plans?
Well, we'd be very surprised if that happens at this stage, given what we've already seen and what we can visually see in this. We've obviously taken XRF readings as well. We're not going to put the XRF results out into the public domain, as I told you the other day, but we have been encouraged by what we've seen. We've been sufficiently encouraged to send the results off or samples off for testing. So it'd be quite a surprise if they came back with nothing at this stage. We do feel we're quietly confident on this one, but we also don't know how deep this system runs as well, Mark. So there's still plenty for us to go out in terms of I-10. But then what we have to do is we then have to look at the regional perspective, and that brings us onto the next image that we can see. So this is from that hole XO77, which is about 3 or 4 kilometers to the southwest of target I-10. Now, this was drilled into a target that we hadn't identified as a target. So it's very interesting for us to see sort of how this was picked. And although we're not looking at the same sort of BIF formation that we can see to the north around I-10 itself, what we can see in this hole is extensive evidence of pyrite, and given the relationship or the apparent relationship between pyrite and gold in the other holes, that's certainly a lead that we want to follow. But we also have evidence of carbonates as well, and that's quite encouraging, because that can be indicative or quite a strong indicator of an alteration system. And the alteration system is basically the process that enables gold mineralization to form and to occur. Now, what that's telling us is that there's also a regional play here as well. So we're in the process of doing an internal reinterpretation of all the data that we've gathered over the Ditau project. We're obviously looking at it through new eyes. It's a new mineralization model, this Lode gold system. We're therefore looking for different types of structure, different types of controlling structure that occur on a regional basis. And what we're looking at is where there might be other areas, other potential target areas. So I-10 gives us a very focused target to obviously to explore further, and who knows, maybe even make a discovery. But what we also want to do is then take the regional perspective across the Ditau project and see what other targets there might be out there.
Okay. Now, just on the pyrite, Ben, of course, that's also known as fool's gold, but it's a pathfinder, isn't it, to real gold?
That's exactly what we're treating it as. So what I described a little earlier about using these IP surveys, these induced polarization surveys, and what they will hopefully identify will be accumulations of pyrite.
Okay.
So if we can then find those, and it turns out that that relationship between the pyrite and the gold is strong enough, then that could be the indicator or the lead which takes us into discovering economic grades of gold, hopefully.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned there the pyrite lead and the BIF lead. So we're really talking potentially two leads here. Is that right? And is there any preference as to which one you go after? I mean, they're potentially two different systems or part of the same formation, or can you explain perhaps the two different leads?
It's all the same lead, Mark. So the BIF, if you think about the BIF is the formation, the sort of the overall target area itself, the rock formation that we're looking for. The pyrite occurs within the BIF. So what the pyrite is showing us is that these mineralization processes have occurred within that BIF as the hydrothermal fluids have passed through the area. The sulfides have dropped out of the hydrothermal fluids, and those have created, obviously, all these mineralizing events have occurred. So it's all part of the same lead.
Okay, excellent. That makes sense. Okay, thank you for that.
So just jumping back now, I put these slides in the wrong order, apologies. But what this cross-section is now showing us is if we go back to target I-10, it's giving us an indication of the actual BIF formation itself. Now, this is a very rudimentary projection at this stage. We've got hole XO77 up to the north, our hole DD004, which is in the middle. But what this is basically sort of giving us a visual depiction of is it's showing that this BIF formation, the strike extent of it so far. So what we now want to get a clearer idea on is how thick is the BIF, but we also want to see how wide is it and how far to the south does it also travel. Obviously, by being able to identify the boundaries of this target area, that will enable us to hone in our exploration efforts and enable us really to focus our energies on the most prospective parts of ground. But so far, this really is turning into what is a very interesting play for us within sort of quite a contained area. So it should be quite a straightforward job for us to explore this one.
Okay, so really you're looking to prove up the BIF even further, get the whole extent of the of how it could be, but really focusing in and trying to hone in on the gold leads that come as part of that exploration.
Pretty much exactly that, yes.
Okay, makes sense.
So this here, this is where I've got my slide order the wrong way. Apologies, but XO81. What we can see here is an image that was taken towards the end of the hole. And again, like with hole XO77, we can see this hole was abandoned at 144 meters with intensifying evidence of sulfides towards the bottom of the hole. We don't quite know what exactly it is that we're looking at here. We need the assay tests to come back and tell us, what of any interest there might be within these rock samples. But what is encouraging is that we've got this intensifying mineralization occurring to the bottom of the hole. If the assay results come back and we find we've got anomalous values in some sort of metal that would be interesting to us, then this is another, great lead for us to pursue, because this hole only went down to 144 meters. So again, there's a lot more for us to learn. But the fact that it was intensifying towards the bottom of the hole tells us that this could be sort of on the outer edges of another interesting system.
Okay, good. So potentially you want to look to go deeper as well, really, to see what is actually below. It's a shame that you say that the holes were stopped when they were, but nothing you can do about that.
No, but it made sense. So the people were looking for diamonds; they weren't looking for metals. So as soon as they recognised, the metal prospectivity of this area, it was of no use to them. So, but from our perspective, there's no way we would have stopped either of these holes where they have certainly chased these deeper into the systems. So to wrap things up, this is a screenshot from the Botswana cadastre system, and our Ditau project is in this area here. You can see the overlapping diamonds license that was over our project area. As soon as we got the report from Dr. Moomin, what we've actually done, Mark, is we've put in 3 applications for new license area to the south of Ditau and to the west of Ditau, taking us up to the national park and also taking us around to our KSZ project. Now, the reason that we've done this is because we did a very sort of quick regional inter. We're not ready to release anything on that yet. That was just purely for our own internal purposes to give us justification for making these applications. But we wanted obviously to tie up as much of the ground as we possibly could, so that if it does turn out that this Lode gold system, if this exploration play is one worth pursuing, we're obviously in a position where we've got more ground, and if there are more target areas that we can identify, this has obviously secured a long-term position for the company. So we've acted quickly. We as a business today, we're performing far faster than we have done ever before. So I'm really, really proud of the team. I think they've done an excellent job in terms of pursuing this as an exploration lead. They've worked really well together. Everyone has made a very big contribution. Tips in particular on these license applications, we turned those around extremely quickly. Now, obviously, we're waiting for these assay results to come in, and touch wood, if those are positive, as we hope they will be, we're actually suddenly in a really strong position with what used to be our third focus project. So it's funny how this business can turn out. You need a bit of luck. It looks like luck has been on our side with this one, and the team is working extremely well. So we're really looking forward to providing more updates in the near future.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Ben. It's, of course, the first time we have spoken in detail about Ditau. As you say, it wasn't perhaps the focus over the past few years of the company. Talked a lot about KSZ and KCB, but it's good to see activities there and get a real sense of what is going on the ground. And it's good that you've got effectively those free exploration holes as well from this other company operating in the area. So next stage, really, wait for those assay results. I have to ask you this question. Do you know when?
Coming weeks. We've moved very quickly on these. We're hoping by early May, so in about 3 weeks' time.
In about 3 weeks' time. Okay, and then that will help you to determine your next stage of exploration there. But I guess are you thinking about that already, or do you really want to wait until those assays have come in to help you plan for the next stage?
We've already got our plans. Again, we're not quite ready to release those yet until we see the assay results. But as I say, the team has really sprung into action on this. So the plan is already in place as to what we'll do next in terms of follow-up steps. But before, obviously, we commit to that, let's just see what the assays come back and tell us. Of course, we have got that KSZ drill campaign that's basically ready to go. We're very keen to pull the trigger on that as soon as we can. So let's just wait for the assays, give it a couple more weeks, and then we're going to make firm decisions on exactly which path we're going to go down.
Okay, but you could you perhaps focus on the KSZ first if it looks more interesting? Is that what you're saying? Would you do 2 exploration programs at once?
No, we would do them sequentially like we did last year. I don't know if it's a case of whether or not it's more interesting. It'll be a question of how much more preparation work would we need to do. KSZ is already drill ready, as we know. We're going to go and drill that B conductor. It's now really a case of just deciding exactly what we need to do at Ditau to get I-10 to drill ready status where we feel completely confident in it. We've got some ideas about twinning that whole XO77. We've got some ideas about, try to test the width and the length of the I-10 target and the BIF. We also like to test the thickness as well. But till we've actually got these assay results, decided on the next steps, we know exactly what the work program needs to be. We're not going to rush into a decision. We want to make the right decision. Yes,
and that's the right way to approach things. But potentially there you've got 2 exploration or active drill campaigns that will be going ahead throughout the summer. Is it fair to say the summer, the British summer?
Yeah, two active drill campaigns this summer. I think that's exactly the best way to classify it.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ben Turney, for taking us through the Ditau project there in so much detail. Thank you very much, Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.